So when I was a kid, my dad showed me this book called The TellTale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Stories, which is an anthology of, West Virginia ghost stories. And he had 2 stories that he submitted in that book. But the story I'm going to tell you is about the Telltale Lilac Bush. So some time ago, there was this old man and this old woman that had married to each other, and they lived by the river. And anytime people saw them, they were always bickering, always fighting with each other. You drink too much. Well, you're a terrible wife, and you don't keep the house clean. And your feet stink, and you snore, and all kinds of stuff. Anything you can think of that an old couple would bicker about, I reckon they were bickering about. So that went on for some time, and then people noticed all of a sudden that the old lady wasn't coming around anymore. The old man had come into town, but the old lady wasn't there. He said, well, she just run off. She just, like you do. She just run off. And then they noticed how happy he was about all of that, and he started having parties at his house. So some years later, he was having some of the boys over, and they were playing poker, I suppose, or playing cards. Could have been Old Maid for all I know. And there was this old lilac bush that was planted kind of close to the house. And guys playing cards, they could hear this tapping on the window. Just tap, 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 tapping on the window. It's like, what the heck is that? Well, they went outside and they saw that the branches of that lilac bush were tapping on the window. There was no wind. So they got curious because the branches just kept swaying. Branches just kept swaying, no wind. So they're like, what the heck is this? And the old man's like, no, nothing. It's just that bush. It's just that bush. And they decided they were going to dig it up. Because they'd probably been drinking too, who knows. So they decided they were going to dig it up. So they got some shovels. And the old man started getting nervous. But they started digging up that lilac bush. And the more they dug, the more nervous the old man got. And then as soon as they got down to the roots of that lilac bush, they found a human hand. So the skeleton hand at the base of that lilac bush around the roots. And then they kept digging and they keep digging, and they saw the old woman's body was in there. So the old man, he's like, oh, they figured me out. And he just ran off. And nobody's seen or heard from him since. Apparently like you do, you just run off.
And you never hear from them again.
And you never hear from him again. Because I don't suppose there's much he could say.
I guess not. It's just like, oh yeah, I came from the town where a friend of my wife, and she took over a lilac bush.
Yeah. Well, we had a big lilac bush in our yard when I was a kid. I was about 12. And when I figured out that was a lilac bush, I stayed clear of it. Because I could swear that the branches were waving, even when the wind wasn't blowing. But I didn't get a shovel.
Smart kid.
Smart kid.